And Minister, for your introduction. Look, I want to repeat the same thing that I've heard said many times this week by quite a number of TDs and opposition deputies, and that's what is happening here in terms of legislation and last-minute changes shoehorned in to committee and report stage in the Seanad is deeply disturbing, and I think really an attempt by government to bypass the Dáil and bypass any scrutiny of contentious and often complex legislation. Moreover, in many cases this week, it is legislation that has the potential to have profound effects on the lives and rights of many people for years to come. Formally, in terms of this bill, the Circular Economy Bill, I have to acknowledge that we did have a good second stage debate and committee stage discussions, and that the Minister did in fact take on board some of the suggestions of the opposition in some areas, not, I have to say, in many of the more important sections of the bill, and areas that we felt urgently needed attention. My problem from the outset with this bill is that it had very little to actually do with the circular economy. Much of it was taken up with changing the law around the usage of CCTV, for example. But now I find that while the Dáil Select Committee spent hours looking over the provisions of the bill, such as they were, we now have before us a different animal entirely, with two substantial amendments from the government to two completely different acts coming back from the Seanad. There are substantial amendments here to the Environmental Protection Agency and the Electricity Generations Act. And it may well be, Minister, that you will say that these are vitally important and necessary and good amendments. It's hard to know, for us to know that, considering we've had absolutely no time to consider, examine or question you, the Minister, on them, and now we have 30 minutes to discuss them. And I don't want to gobble up all that time from other deputies, but I do want to say, for a government that loves to lecture the opposition on shoddy legislation and unintended consequences of poorly drafted bills, you have taken some liberties this week with the entire legislative process in relation to the changes of the EPA, and the issuing of licences. Yet again, a substantial change to existing laws proposed because of the urgency and the need to speed through the emergency purchase of electricity generation to head off power cuts in 2023-24. And again, I will repeat, I say this entire crisis, despite repeated denials from your party and from the government ministers, this entire crisis and the panic is rooted in the insane policy of this and other governments in relation to the proliferation of data centres. And I know for sure that in the end we will be proven right on this. You can deny it as much as you wish. There are clear warnings from Crew and from Bríd that it is data centre proliferation that is driving up the unheard, unforeseen demand of electricity, not the electrification of transport or other areas, and none of this is a natural byproduct. It's the policy of the government that are responsible for this. While decrying attempts to ban or place a moratorium on data centres, the ministers are now saying, oh, we effectively have a moratorium through Crew's instructions to Bríd. Well, we have a delay for new applications, but we know that up to 8 massive centres have approval and will be connected in the short coming years. And therein lies the panic and the observation of the Green Party ministers justifying the purchase of what will be gas-fired emergency generators. And when these arrive, the very fact of their existence and the need for them will be further used to justify building and support for the siting of LNG terminals here. All of these, needless to say, will impact on our emissions targets and on any hopes of cutting CO2 in the coming years to the level required by the Climate Act or indeed by the Paris Treaty. So I don't know, frankly, if the changes to the EPA process of issuing these licences is a simple thing or a good thing. I don't know if it's just a box-ticking exercise with no unintended consequences down the road. But I do know that we are being bounced into this because of a panic caused by a policy to allow data centre expansion, and that, I have no doubt, will come back to haunt us.